beneath the gleaming towers of Nephara, where 1,000 alien species conducted their business in perfect harmony, Commander Alexia Voss stood at her office window watching the city's pulse. The capital world hummed with the rhythm of galactic civilization, transport ships threading between crystalline spires, holographic advertisements dancing across building facades, and the constant flow of beings who believed they controlled their own destiny. But Alexia knew better. In the reflection of her darkened window, she could see the weight in her own eyes, the burden of knowing that beneath Nephara's brilliant surface, something sinister waited in the shadows. The comm unit on her desk chimed with an urgent tone. Commander Voss, report to Admiral Chen's office immediately. Priority Alpha. As she made her way through the military complex's sterile corridors, Alexia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The peace that had settled over the galaxy after the border wars felt fragile, like a soap bubble waiting to burst. Her instincts, honed by years of military service, whispered that the calm was too perfect, too orchestrated. Admiral Chen's office overlooked the Senate district, where the galaxy's most powerful figures made decisions that affected trillions of lives. The elderly admiral turned from his window as Alexia entered, his weathered face grave. Commander, we have a situation. Senator Darius Caine was found dead in his apartment this morning. Preliminary reports suggest an accidental fall down the stairs, but something doesn't add up. Alexia studied the holographic crime scene photos that materialized before her. Caine lay crumpled at the bottom of his marble staircase, but his positioning seemed wrong, too deliberate. What makes you suspicious, sir? Caine was scheduled to give a crucial vote on the Military Autonomy Act tomorrow. His death swings the vote in favor of increased military powers. Chan's eyes narrowed. Call it an old soldier's intuition, but I don't believe in convenient accidents. The investigation began immediately. Alexia's team combed through Caine's apartment, finding subtle signs of struggle that the local authorities had missed. Security footage showed Caine entering his building alone, but the timestamp flickered a sign of digital manipulation. More disturbing were Caine's personal files. His communication logs showed messages from contacts that didn't exist, meetings, scheduled by assistants who had no record of employment. Financial records revealed a complex web of transactions connecting to shell companies across multiple star systems. Commander, her lieutenant, Marcus Webb, called from across Caine's study. You need to see this. Hidden behind a false panel in Caine's desk was a datapad containing encrypted files. When Alexia's tech specialist cracked the encryption, they found correspondence that made her blood run cold. The messages spoke of the plan, of removing obstacles, and of someone known only as the architect. The deeper Alexia dug, the more tangled the threads became. What seemed like an accident was quickly unraveling into a conspiracy, one that reached into the very heart of the government, who was pulling the strings. Her investigation led her to other suspicious deaths: a trade minister who had died in a transport accident, a military contractor who had suffered a heart attack, all opponents of policies that had mysteriously passed after their deaths. Each death appeared natural, but the pattern was too perfect to be coincidence. As Alexia traced the connections, she began to notice something chilling. Every major political decision in the past 5 years could be traced back to these convenient deaths, strategic resignations, and sudden policy reversals. Someone was orchestrating the galaxy's political landscape with surgical precision. The first attempt on her life came as she left the Senate archives. A sniper's bolt seared past her head, splintering the stone wall behind her. Only her military reflexes saved her as she rolled behind a fountain, drawing her sidearm. You're getting too close, Commander. The voice came from her unix, untraceable. Some secrets are worth killing for. The message was clear. She was no longer just investigating a murder. She was threatening something much larger, something that would kill to protect itself. Alexia's team worked around the clock, following financial trails and communication patterns. Slowly, a picture emerged of a vast organization operating in the shadows. They called themselves the Dominion of Shadows, and their reach extended into every level of government, military, and commerce. The organization's structure was like a spider's web, compartmentalized, resilient, with each member knowing only their small piece of the larger puzzle. But at the center of it all was a figure known only as the architect, someone who had been manipulating galactic events for decades. The breakthrough came when Alexia's team intercepted a coded transmission. The encryption was but their tech specialist recognized a signature. Commander, this isn't just military encryption, it's from our own command structure. The realization hit Alexia like a physical blow. The puppet master wasn't some external threat, they were operating from within the very organization she served. The enemy had been inside all along, pulling strings from the highest levels of military command. Following the transmission's origin led them to a secured facility on Nephara's outskirts. As they approached under cover of darkness, Alexia felt the weight of betrayal settling over her. How many of her colleagues were compromised? How many of the orders she had followed had been part of this grand manipulation? The facility was a front for something much larger. Hidden beneath its innocuous exterior was a command center that monitored communications across the galaxy. Screens showed real-time feeds from government offices, military bases, and corporate boardrooms. This was where the strings were pulled, where the puppet master controlled his vast network. And there, standing before the main display with his back to them, was Admiral Varric Talon. Alexia's breath caught in her throat. Talon had been her mentor, the man who had shaped her career and guided her through the complexities of military service. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. "I wondered when you would find your way here, Alexia." Talon turned, his familiar face now seeming foreign and cold. "You always were too perceptive for your own good." "Admiral Talon," she whispered, her weapon trained on the man she had once trusted above all others. "You're the architect." "I prefer to think of myself as a curator of history," he replied, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had once comforted her. "The galaxy was chaos before I brought order to it. Every war, every peace treaty, every political decision, all carefully orchestrated to bring stability." The screens around them showed the fruits of his manipulation. Maps displaying military positions, political pressure points, economic leverage, all tools in his grand design. The name Talon echoed in Alexia's mind like a curse. The puppet master, his hands had touched everything. His whispers had poisoned the galaxy's leaders. "You call the deaths of innocent people stability?" Alexia's voice was steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "Necessary sacrifices," Talon replied without emotion. "A few deaths to prevent the chaos that would cost millions of lives. I've seen what happens when the galaxy lacks strong leadership, Alexia. The border wars were just a preview of what's coming." He gestured to the screens showing rising tensions across multiple star systems. "These conflicts aren't random. They're part of a larger pattern, a chaos that only I can control. When the galaxy tears itself apart, I'll be there to rebuild it under proper leadership." "Your leadership," Alexia said, understanding dawning. "Who else?" Talon's smile was cold. "I've spent decades positioning the right people, removing obstacles, creating the perfect conditions for order. The galaxy will thank me when the alternative is annihilation." The screens flickered, showing new data streams. Alexia realized with horror that this wasn't just about past manipulations. Talon was orchestrating events in real time. Military units were being repositioned, diplomatic communications were being intercepted and altered, and political leaders were receiving fabricated intelligence. "You're starting a war," she breathed. "I'm ending one before it begins," Talon corrected. "The galaxy stands on the brink of conflicts that will dwarf anything we've seen. Unless someone with vision takes control, we'll destroy ourselves." The facility's security alarms suddenly blared. Talon's expression didn't change, but his fingers moved across a control panel with practiced ease. "You brought friends, I see. How disappointing. I had hoped you would understand." On the screens, Alexia could see her team moving through the facility, but something was wrong. Their movements were being tracked, their positions fed to waiting. Security forces. Even now, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, Talon remained 3 steps ahead. "You should have trusted me, Alexia. I had plans for you, a role in the new order, but you've chosen to stand with chaos instead of control." The facility shook as explosions echoed through the corridors. Talon's security forces were engaging her team, but the battle was uneven. Her people were walking into carefully prepared traps, their every move anticipated. "Stand down, Admiral," Alexia commanded, her weapon never wavering. "It's over." "No, my dear student, it's just beginning." The screens around them went dark, then flickered back to life, showing a different scene. Government buildings across Nephara were under attack, explosions lighting up the night sky. Military units were engaging each other in what appeared to be a coordinated uprising. "False flag operations," Talon explained calmly. "Each side believes they're defending against the other's aggression. By morning, the Senate will be in ruins, and the galaxy will be crying out for strong leadership." Alexia's unit crackled, with frantic reports from across the city. The carefully orchestrated chaos was unfolding exactly as Talon had planned. Even as she held him at gunpoint, His network was executing the final phase of his decades-long manipulation. You can't stop this, Alexia. Even if you kill me, the plan is already in motion. The galaxy will burn, and from the ashes, order will rise. But Alexia had spent years learning from Talon, studying his methods and his mind. She knew him well enough to recognize his greatest weakness, his need for control. A plan this complex required constant oversight, real-time adjustments, and personal intervention. You're right, she said, surprising him. I can't stop this, but I can do something else. She turned her weapon toward the command center's main console. Talon's eyes widened as he realized her intent. You'll destroy everything. The galaxy will tear itself apart without proper guidance. Then we'll rebuild it without puppet masters pulling the strings. The betrayal hit Alexia like a punch to the gut as her Lieutenant Webb appeared behind her, his weapon trained on her back. The man she had trusted, fought beside, and protected was one of Talon's pawns. I'm sorry, Commander, Webb said, his voice filled with genuine regret. But the Admiral is right. The galaxy needs strong leadership. Alexia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of isolation. How many of her allies were compromised? How many of the people she trusted were part of Talon's web? But there was no time to mourn. It was now or never. Talon had made his move, and she would have to make hers. The galaxy's future rested on her shoulders, when she spun and fired. Webb's shot going wide as he fell. The sound of her weapon echoed through the command center as she turned back to Talon, who was already moving toward an emergency console. You always were too sentimental, he said, his fingers flying across the controls. That's why you could never see the bigger picture. The screens showed the chaos spreading across Nephara and beyond. But Alexia noticed something else: communication nodes going dark. Command structures failing, the careful orchestration beginning to break down. Every network has a weakness, she said, advancing on the main console. Even yours. Talon's eyes narrowed as he realized what she was seeing. The very complexity of his web made it fragile. Remove the right nodes, disrupt the key communications, and the whole structure would collapse. The battle for the command center was brief but vicious. Talon's remaining security forces fought with desperate intensity, but they were facing a commander who had learned from their master. Alexia used their own coordination against them, disrupting their communications and turning their disciplined response into chaos. When the smoke cleared, Talon stood alone before his banks of monitors, watching his carefully constructed empire crumble. The false flag operations were faltering without central coordination. Military units were standing down as authentic communications cut through the fabricated orders. And across the galaxy, the truth was beginning to emerge. You've doomed us all, Talon said, his voice hollow. Without control, without guidance, they'll destroy everything. Maybe, Alexia replied, her weapon still trained on him, but at least it will be their choice. The final confrontation came not with weapons, but with words. Talon, stripped of his network and his power, tried one last manipulation. He spoke of the chaos that would come, the wars that would rage, the billions who would die without his guiding hand. But Alexia had seen the cost of his order, the lives sacrificed, the freedoms stolen, the potential crushed beneath the weight of his grand design. She had learned that true peace couldn't be imposed from above. It had to grow from within. Dawn broke over Nephara. The city bore the scars of Talon's final gambit. Smoke rose from government buildings. Emergency services rushed through streets littered with debris, and the galaxy's leaders struggled to understand what had happened. But the truth was emerging. The Dominion of Shadows was exposed, its members arrested or fleeing. The puppet master was dead, but his legacy would live on in the shadows of every decision, every movement. The galaxy had been changed forever, but there was still hope, as long as people like Alexia remained to guard it. In the aftermath, Alexia stood once again at her office window, watching Nephara rebuild itself. The city looked different now, less perfect, more honest. The scars of Talon's manipulation would take time to heal, but already she could see signs of genuine cooperation, of people making their own choices rather than following invisible strings. Investigation into the Dominion of Shadows would continue for years, unraveling decades of manipulation and control. Some of Talon's network would escape, disappearing into the shadows to perhaps try again someday. But the galaxy was awake now, alert to the dangers of those who would control from the darkness. Alexia had been offered promotion, recognition, honors for her role in exposing the conspiracy, but she had declined them all, choosing instead a new mission. She would be the one who watched the Watchers, who looked for the patterns that others missed, who stood guard against future puppet masters. The galaxy was free, but freedom required eternal vigilance, and as long as beings like Alexia Voss were willing to stand in the light and face the shadows, that freedom would endure. The war for control was over, but the battle for truth had just begun.